My name is Sophia, and I was 22 when my world collapsed. I came home from college expecting warm hugs and home cooked meals. Instead, I found a foreclosure notice on our front door and my entire life packed in boxes on the curb. When I called my father, his voice was cold. "Figure it out yourself," he said. I cut off all contact that day. 2 years and 247 unanswered calls later, I finally understood what family really means. Let me know where you're from in the comments, and subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal and rebuilding. Growing up in Millbrook, everything looked perfect from the outside. My parents, David and Helen, gave us a comfortable middle-class life. Dad was a management consultant. Mom managed a hotel. We had the house with the white brick, the manicured lawn, the family photos in matching frames. But inside that house, there were no real rules except one. You had to be perfect. Perfect grades weren't celebrated. They were expected. My parents never came to my school events unless I had a lead role. When I placed second in the math competition, I didn't get congratulations. I got a lecture about trying harder next time. Every achievement was just a stepping stone to the next one. There was no finish line. By middle school, they stopped hugging me. We didn't have conversations about my dreams or my feelings. We had conversations about my grades and my college prospects. The emotional distance between us grew into something I couldn't cross. But I still excelled. Straight A's in high school, president of debate team, editor of the yearbook. I was building the perfect college application because that's what you did in my family. The day I got my full scholarship to Westbrook University for civil engineering was the last time I saw my parents actually proud of me. Engineering wasn't random. Since I was 8 years old, I'd been sketching bridge designs. I dreamed about building structures that would connect communities, that would transform infrastructure in rural areas and developing countries. I wanted to create spaces where people could thrive. That dream kept me going through all that coldness at home. My bedroom was my sanctuary. It was the only space that was truly mine. Gray walls covered with my sketches, bookshelves filled with engineering books I'd saved for years to buy. And on a special shelf, I kept treasures from my grandfather: his vintage drafting compass, his handwritten journals, and a wooden box with the only family heirlooms I owned. Grandpa James had been my emotional lifeline. Every summer with him, he'd tell me the same thing while we worked on restoration projects together. Your worth isn't in what you achieve, Sophia. It's in who you are. After he passed when I was 11, that wooden box became my most precious possession. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at a hardware store, saving every penny for textbooks and supplies my scholarship didn't cover. My parents made it clear. Tuition is covered, everything else is your responsibility. Building independence, they called it. I was terrified and excited to leave home. My first year at Westbrook, I felt like I could finally breathe. My roommate Natasha was from Kenya, studying business. She introduced me to James, a software engineer major who lived down the hall. For the first time in my life, I had real friends who liked me just for being me, not for what I'd accomplished. I joined the engineering society. I volunteered teaching kids about sustainable infrastructure. I even went on my first real date. My professors saw potential in my work. One of them, Dr. Walsh, took me under his wing and mentored me. I barely talked to my parents that year. Just quick weekly calls asking about grades and internships. I didn't tell them about my friendships or how happy I was. I knew they wouldn't care about those things. As summer approached, I felt anxious. I still called it home, even though it didn't feel like home. When I mentioned summer plans on our last call before I came back, my father was distant. He just said, "We'll figure it out when you arrive." I should have known something was wrong, but I was focused on finishing strong. I aced my presentations. I made the dean's list. I won an award for my sustainable bridge design. Natasha and James threw me a small celebration in our dorm. We took photos and promised to stay in touch. Before I left, they asked if I'd be okay going home. I said yes, but the truth was I was nervous. Still, I told myself it was just 3 months. I had my room there, my books, my designs, my space, or so I thought. The bus ride home took 6 hours. I watched the landscape change from the college town back to familiar suburbs. A part of me was looking forward to sleeping in my own bed surrounded by my sketches and books. I texted my parents when the bus was about to arrive. No response. I figured they were busy. When I got off the bus and walked to my neighborhood, something felt wrong immediately. As I turned onto our street, I slowed down. From a distance, our house looked different. Drawing closer, I saw it clearly. A large orange and white sign in the front yard. Foreclosure. My heart started racing. I approached the driveway and saw boxes. Dozens of boxes stacked near the garage. Some taped shut hastily, some water damaged from recent rain. With shaking hands, I opened the nearest box. My books were inside, thrown in haphazardly, many with bent pages and damaged covers. A voice called from next door. Mr. Chen, our elderly neighbor, stood on his porch looking at me with pity. "Those boxes have been sitting there for 4 days," he said. "I tried calling your parents when they started putting your things out there, but they said you already knew what was happening." I couldn't speak. I just pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called my father. "Hello, Sophia." His voice was the same professional tone he used with business calls. "Dad, what's happening? There's a foreclosure sign in our yard and all my stuff is in boxes." My voice cracked. "Yes, we sold the house. Your mother and I moved to Phoenix. We discussed this months ago." His words hit me like physical blows. They had never mentioned any of this. Not once. "What? When? Where am I supposed to go?" I could feel panic rising in my throat. "You're an adult now, Sophia. You have a scholarship. You need to handle your own arrangements." His voice had no emotion, no sympathy, nothing. "But my things, Grandpa's box, my books. Where am I supposed to live this summer?" The dorms are closed. Tears were streaming down my face now. I didn't care who saw me. "We kept what was important. The rest is there for you to deal with. You should be grateful we didn't throw everything away. This is part of growing up." His voice was so clinical it made me sick. "Growing up? You threw me out with no warning. You didn't even tell me you were losing the house." I was shouting now. "Handle it, Sophia. You've always been independent. Now's your chance to prove it." Then he hung up. I stood there frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, unable to process what had just happened. Everything I'd accomplished that year meant nothing in that moment. I was homeless with zero warning and zero preparation. Mr. Chen came over to me. He saw me break down. He brought me inside, gave me a place to sleep that night. The next morning, I went through every single box. I inventoried what was left of my life. So much was missing. Grandpa's wooden box, my expensive engineering reference books that I'd saved for years to buy, my winter clothes, most of my shoes. What was left seemed random, like they'd packed in a hurry without thinking about what I might actually need. I tried calling my father again. Voicemail. I tried my mother. She didn't answer. So I texted them both. "How could you do this? Where's Grandpa's box? Where are my winter clothes and my books?" An hour later, my mother texted back. "We kept some things for sentimental reasons. We donated your books to the library. We gave your winter clothes to charity. Buy new ones with your summer job money." The casual way she threw away my most precious possessions was the final betrayal. I sent one last message. "Don't contact me again, ever." Then I blocked both their numbers. That night, I slept on Mr. Chen's fold-out couch, too shocked to even cry. Around midnight, a thunderstorm came through. I watched from the window as rain soaked into the cardboard boxes containing what was left of my childhood. Just like my parents' love, those boxes weren't strong enough to protect anything. Morning came. Mr. Chen made me coffee and toast and treated me with a kindness that only highlighted how cruel my parents had been. He made some calls to friends looking for housing options. By afternoon, I'd found the last available room in a rundown Victorian house converted into student housing, 6 blocks from my old home. The rent would eat through my savings within weeks. My new room was barely larger than a closet. Peeling wallpaper, a mattress that sagged in the middle. My roommate Diane was a pharmacy student who worked nights and slept during the day. She made it clear immediately that she wanted silence and privacy. Mr. Chen helped me salvage what we could from the rain-damaged boxes. Many of my books were destroyed, pages stuck together, covers warped beyond recognition. My sketches and designs were worst of all. Years of work reduced to soggy, smeared paper. I photographed what I could still read before I had to throw the rest away. With shelter barely secured and my savings disappearing fast, I needed to find work immediately. The summer job market was already saturated with students who'd planned ahead. After 3 days of rejections, I finally got 3 part-time positions. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening hours at a bookstore, weekend tutoring for high school students struggling with math. My schedule became impossible. I was up at 4:30 a.m. for the 5 a.m. coffee shop shift, a few hours in the afternoon looking for better housing and trying to save my possessions, then 6 hours at the bookstore before collapsing into bed, weekends consumed with tutoring. No rest, no time to think. Despite working nearly 70 hours every week, I could barely cover my rent and food. The summer internship at an engineering firm that I'd hoped for wasn't happening. 2 weeks into this exhausting routine, my Aunt Patricia called me. Unlike my father, she'd always shown genuine interest in my life. Sophia, I just found out what happened. Her voice was tight with anger. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have given you our guest room immediately. When did you find out? I asked. Your father mentioned it casually during our monthly call, like abandoning you is completely normal. He said you were being dramatic. Patricia sounded disgusted. They've been planning this move for months, Sophia. This wasn't sudden. Did they say why? I asked. They used the money from selling your house to buy investment properties in Arizona. They wanted to get into real estate development, but needed capital. She paused. And they made it clear they're not supporting you financially anymore. They said college students should be self-sufficient. The confirmation that this was planned hurt, even though I was too exhausted to feel much. Patricia offered me money. I was too proud to accept it at first, but she insisted on sending me some anyway. It arrived just in time to cover a medical bill when I developed bronchitis from exhaustion and not eating properly. June turned into July, and my health got worse. Constant work and no sleep left me exhausted all the time. I couldn't afford proper meals. I ate discounted groceries from my bookstore shifts and leftover pastries from the coffee shop. I lost weight. My clothes hung loose. I wasn't sleeping well. When I did sleep, I had anxiety dreams where I was being forced out of my bed. Dark thoughts started creeping in during the day. What was the point of struggling so hard just to survive? All my academic success seemed meaningless now. All I cared about was basic survival. My friendships with Natasha and James suffered too. At first, I'd shared abbreviated versions of what happened, downplaying how bad it was. But as the weeks went on, I stopped responding to their messages altogether. I couldn't bridge the gap between their carefree summers and my desperate reality. They kept reaching out, but I couldn't find words to explain without falling apart. By mid-July, the summer session started, and I tried to take one class to keep up with my coursework. It was a disaster. I couldn't focus. My perfect GPA started slipping. I failed the midterm. My professor suggested I withdraw instead of risking academic probation. That failure triggered my first panic attack. In the bathroom stall after class, I couldn't breathe. My chest was constricting. I was convinced I was dying. The campus health center told me I had acute anxiety and recommended counseling I couldn't afford and had no time to attend. Then I got an email from the scholarship committee. They wanted to meet about my academic performance. Without a minimum GPA, I'd lose my full scholarship. The future I'd worked so hard for was crumbling, and I had no safety net. One evening, while I was shelving books at work, I saw a woman who looked like my mother. That's all it took. Just seeing someone who resembled her sent me into another panic attack, this time in front of customers and coworkers. My manager sent me home with a warning about bringing my personal problems to work. That night, in my tiny, suffocating room, I curled up on that sagging mattress and finally let myself feel the full weight of the abandonment. My parents didn't just leave me without a home. They systematically destroyed every support I might have relied on. They even took the mementos that connected me to my grandfather's love. The betrayal felt total and irreversible. For the first time, I faced the possibility that I might not survive this. Not physically necessarily, but the person I'd been, ambitious, confident, driven, was disappearing. Without help, I wasn't sure who would be left. August came with brutal heat and mounting financial pressure. My scholarship was still in jeopardy. Fall semester was just weeks away. The university kept sending urgent emails about fees not covered by my scholarship. housing deposits, activity fees, textbook costs. Each notification made my anxiety worse, but I had nothing to pay with. Credit card debt piled up fast as I charged expenses I couldn't cover. The interest rates were predatory, designed to trap desperate people like me. Each minimum payment I scraped together barely made a dent in what I owed. Financial anxiety became my constant companion. It woke me up every morning and followed me to every exhausting job. Then Diane announced she was moving in with her boyfriend. Suddenly, I was responsible for the full rent, or I had to find a new roommate immediately. No one responded to my ads. The landlord gave me 10 days to pay the full amount or get out. I was desperate. I unblocked my parents' numbers and called my father, hoping he might be more compassionate than my mother. Sophia. His voice was stiff and formal. I assume you're calling about money. Dad, I'm about to lose my scholarship and my housing. I can't work more hours than I already am. I need help. Swallowing my pride felt like choking on glass, but I had no other options. Your mother and I discussed this. We think you're experiencing necessary growing pains. Real life isn't handed to you. You have to earn your way. He sounded like he was reading from a parenting manual. He wasn't even there. He wasn't even real. Growing pains? I'm working 3 jobs and barely feeding myself. You left me homeless without any warning. My voice got louder with every word, anger replacing exhaustion for a moment. That attitude is exactly your problem. You've always felt entitled. We supported you for 18 years. Other parents don't support their children through college at all. You didn't just stop supporting me. You sabotaged me. You threw away my things. You took family heirlooms that weren't even yours to take. You didn't even warn me. I wouldn't have needed to figure out emergency housing if you'd given me just a little warning. His voice hardened. Those heirlooms belong to our family. Your grandfather would have wanted us to have them. And if you'd called more often during the semester instead of getting caught up in college, you would have known our plans. The unfairness of that statement stunned me. They deliberately hid their plans and then blamed me for not somehow knowing about them anyway. You're ungrateful, Sophia. We gave you everything. Now you're acting like a victim because we expect you to be an adult. Something inside me broke with those words. The last bit of hope that my parents might acknowledge what they'd done to me just shattered. I never want to speak to either of you again, I said. My voice was suddenly calm. You didn't give me everything. You taught me that family means nothing. You taught me that love is conditional. You taught me I can't trust the people who should protect me most. Congratulations. That's the last lesson you'll ever teach me. I hung up and blocked their numbers again. This time it felt permanent, like cauterizing an infected wound. Painful, but necessary to survive. The next morning, the landlord handed me an eviction notice. I had 48 hours to leave. With nowhere to go and most of my possessions already gone, I packed my few remaining clothes into my backpack. The engineering textbooks I'd managed to save were too heavy, so I had to leave them behind. That night, an unseasonable thunderstorm swept through the region. Without shelter, I sat in the covered entryway of the public library, soaked and shivering as lightning cracked overhead. I was hungry. I was exhausted. Hours passed in complete misery. By dawn, fever was burning through me. My clothes were still damp against my clammy skin. I tried to walk to my morning coffee shop shift, but I only made it 2 blocks before I collapsed on a bench, too dizzy to continue. A stranger called an ambulance. Despite my protests about the medical costs, I woke up in a hospital emergency room. Bright lights after all that gray. The doctors told me I had severe dehydration, malnutrition, and pneumonia. My body was shutting down. They wanted to admit me, but I told them I couldn't afford it. A hospital social worker came in. I explained everything through the fever, the abandonment, the lost scholarship, the eviction, the jobs I couldn't do anymore. She took notes and asked questions about my age and student status. There are resources for students in crisis, she told me. Let me call your university. I was too sick to fight. As antibiotics went into my IV, I just gave up. For the first time since I found that foreclosure notice 2 months earlier, I let go. I didn't know if anything would be left of me when I woke up. When I opened my eyes, Professor Walsh was sitting beside my hospital bed. For a moment, I thought the fever was making me hallucinate. Welcome back, he said softly. You've been asleep almost 20 hours. I was confused. How did he even know I was here? The hospital called student services when you were admitted. When they heard your name, they contacted me. He leaned forward, concern in his eyes. Sophia, why didn't you reach out? The department would have helped you. I didn't want anyone to know, I whispered. My throat was raw. I thought I could handle it myself. Professor Walsh shook his head. No one handles homelessness and abandonment alone, especially not at 22. That's not independence. That's isolation. Over the next hour, as my mind cleared, he told me about a research assistant position in the engineering department. It wasn't glamorous, but it came with a small stipend and access to graduate student housing during the summer. It's a single room in a shared apartment, he explained. Basic, but clean and secure. You won't be hungry. Tears came to my eyes. I'd been alone for so long. Why would you do this for me? Because your talent is exceptional and what happened to you is unjust. More importantly, because that's what a community does. It supports its members through crisis. That concept, community as a safety net, was revolutionary to me. After years of being told I had to do everything myself, suddenly there was a community that cared. The engineering department covered my hospital bills through an emergency fund. Financial aid restructured my scholarship, giving me a probationary semester to rebuild my GPA without losing funding. I was discharged after 3 days. My new graduate housing was sparse but clean. A real bed. A working shower. For the first week, I just slept and ate regular meals at the summer dining hall. My body was finally reclaiming what it had lost. Professor Walsh introduced me to Dr. Lisa Chen, who specialized in family estrangement. Our twice-weekly sessions focused on immediate survival, managing panic attacks, establishing routines, processing the trauma of abandonment. What your parents did wasn't just unkind, Dr. Chen told me during one session. It was psychological abuse. The suddenness was intentionally destabilizing. But why? What purpose did it serve? That question had haunted me for months. Control, she said simply. By keeping you in crisis, they maintain power even while physically absent. They're probably expecting you to eventually break down and beg for help on their terms. That resonated painfully. My parents had always valued control more than emotional connection. Their final act had been designed to reinforce my dependence, not foster independence like they claimed. By late summer, my research assistant work gave me structure and purpose. It was straightforward. Organizing archives, digitizing blueprints, compiling research. Not creatively challenging, but it reconnected me to engineering and to people who treated me as a valued colleague. As I got healthy physically, I finally responded to Natasha and James's worried messages. Their immediate, unconditional support overwhelmed me. I'm changing my flight and coming back early, Natasha declared. I'm not letting you do this alone anymore. And I'm helping you move into the dorms as soon as they open, James said. No arguments. Their practical help offered without pity or judgment healed something fundamental in how I understood relationships. People could care without expecting something in return. Support didn't have invisible strings attached. Through the university, I connected with other students who'd experienced family estrangement. Our weekly group meetings showed me I wasn't alone. Other students had faced similar abandonment for reasons ranging from sexual orientation to religious differences to just family dysfunction. Their stories broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. Rebecca, a mechanical engineering student, became a close friend. She'd been disowned 3 years ago for leaving her parents' religious community. She'd built a good life without her family's support. The first year is the hardest, she told me over coffee. You're grieving people who are still alive. But eventually you build a chosen family that actually loves you for who you are, not who they demand you be. As summer ended and fall semester approached, I had stable housing and my scholarship was provisionally back. I could finally look beyond immediate survival. Professor Walsh helped me design a manageable course load focusing on quality over quantity. My first engineering project became deeply personal. I designed water infrastructure for a developing rural region facing climate challenges. Design from your lived experience, he encouraged me. What would have made a difference for you this summer? The result was a modular water system with shared resources and built-in resilience features. I got the highest marks of my academic career. More importantly, it reconnected me to why I wanted to be an engineer in the first place, to create infrastructure that fosters security and belonging. By mid-semester, I'd reestablished routines, rebuilt friendships, and reconnected with my goals. The panic attacks were less frequent, though nightmares still happened. My focus expanded beyond just surviving. I was sketching for enjoyment again. Movie nights with friends. I was even laughing sometimes. Dr. Chen helped me understand that recovery wasn't linear. Some days still brought overwhelming grief for the family relationship I'd lost. Not the actual relationship, which had been conditional and controlling, but the idealized family I'd always wanted. Accepting that my parents would never be those people was an ongoing process. Healing doesn't mean forgetting or forgiving, she explained. It means the pain no longer controls your daily choices. It means building a life where that relationship doesn't define your worth. Gradually, painfully, I built that life. One independent decision, one healthy relationship, one achievement at a time. The 2 years after that traumatic summer transformed me completely. I graduated with honors despite that difficult semester. I got a job with Horizon Infrastructure Consulting, specializing in sustainable development projects. I rented my first real apartment in the downtown district. My portfolio expanded with meaningful projects, including a water management system for an underserved community that won recognition from the Planning Commission. But the external changes were less important than the internal ones. Independence, once forced on me as punishment, became a source of quiet pride. Each rent payment I made with my own earnings, each professional challenge I navigated successfully, each holiday I celebrated with chosen family rather than biological relatives built confidence that my parents' absence couldn't shake. My apartment became the sanctuary I'd once sought in my childhood bedroom. Large windows, natural light, walls covered with engineering drawings and photographs of meaningful moments. My graduation with Natasha and James, the ribbon cutting for my water project, weekend hikes with my expanding circle of friends. Each image represented connection freely given, not contingent on performance. Financial stability came gradually. I developed systems for everything: emergency savings, retirement contributions, insurance. Creating the security my parents had stripped away. Each financial decision strengthened my self-reliance. Romance entered my life unexpectedly through a community garden project where I volunteered monthly. Michael, a landscape architect passionate about sustainable urban design, approached me with questions about incorporating water features into community spaces. Our professional conversation evolved into coffee, then dinner, then a relationship built on mutual respect and transparent communication. "Tell me about your family," he asked during our third date. "I don't have contact with my biological family," I said simply, waiting for the awkward questions. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "Family is who shows up for you, not who shares your DNA. I'd like to hear that story whenever you're ready, but no pressure." His response reflected the emotional intelligence that would later make him an invaluable partner. When I finally shared my full story of abandonment, he listened without judgment, never pushed for reconciliation when I said I was content with my estrangement. "Some broken things shouldn't be glued back together," he said. "Sometimes the breaking creates space for something healthier to grow." As my professional reputation grew, so did my financial security. The promotion to project manager came with a substantial salary increase. I could finally pay off the debt from that desperate summer. Each credit card I paid off represented another link in the chain of dependence severed. By the second anniversary of finding my belongings in foreclosed boxes, I was debt-free with growing savings and a clear career trajectory. That day passed without acknowledgement until Michael mentioned it casually over dinner. "It's been exactly 2 years today, hasn't it?" he asked gently. I paused, fork midair. "How did you remember that?" "It's important to you, even if you don't mark it officially." He squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you. Most people wouldn't have rebuilt so completely from that starting point." His recognition triggered unexpected emotion. I'd been so focused on moving forward that I'd rarely acknowledged how far I'd actually come. 2 years earlier, I was hospitalized, homeless, and hopeless. Now I stood on solid ground entirely of my own creation. The next morning, my phone showed a notification. 247 missed calls from my father's number over the past 2 years. Still blocked, but persistently trying to reach me. Each call had gone straight to voicemail without alerting me. Curiosity overcame caution. I logged into my voicemail and found dozens of messages. They started with angry demands shortly after I blocked them, then evolved into increasingly desperate pleas. The most recent, from just days earlier, contained something I'd never heard in my father's voice before. Genuine fear. "Sophia, please. Your mother's had a stroke. We need you to call us. Things are difficult here. Please." The weakness in her voice, so different from her controlled tone, gave me pause. I searched online and confirmed it. My mother had suffered a major stroke 3 weeks earlier. Local news mentioned mounting medical bills and potential foreclosure for the Nakamura family. My Aunt Patricia called that same afternoon, unaware I'd discovered the news independently. "I know you're still angry and you have every right to be," she began cautiously, "but I thought you should know what's happening." The story revealed how completely my parents' circumstances had changed. Their Arizona real estate investments had failed catastrophically. Properties purchased at inflated prices now stood vacant and unsellable, draining their savings through mortgage payments and taxes. They lost almost everything, even before my mother's stroke. Their financial collapse had been swift and total. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "I'm not suggesting you help them financially," she clarified quickly. "God knows they don't deserve it after what they did. I just thought maybe this changes how you feel about communication. Your father seems genuinely remorseful, though that might just be because they're suffering now." The information created complicated emotions I hadn't anticipated. Not satisfaction at their misfortune. I wasn't wired for that, but confusion about my own responsibilities. The parents who had abandoned me now faced abandonment by the financial system they'd prioritized over family bonds. That evening, I discussed it with Michael and my closest friends during our weekly dinner. Their perspectives varied but shared a common thread. This decision belonged entirely to me. There was no right answer dictated by obligation or conventional morality. "Would contact help your healing or hinder it?" Natasha asked practically. "That's the only question that matters." James was more direct. "They're essentially strangers who hurt you. Would you rush to help strangers just because they're now suffering?" Dr. Chen provided the most clarifying framework during our monthly check-in. "Consider what you need from potential contact. Not what they need. What you need. Closure, acknowledgement of harm. Nothing at all. Your needs are valid regardless of their circumstances." After days of reflection, I realized I did want something. Not reconciliation, but resolution. The opportunity to speak my truth directly without the desperation that had colored our last conversation. To look them in the eyes as the successful adult I'd become, despite them, not because of them. With that clarity, I made a decision that would shape the next phase of my journey. One based on my needs, not their expectations or conventional family obligations. The Phoenix airport was full of vacation energy. Families reuniting, tourists heading to resorts, all in stark contrast to my solemn purpose. I'd chosen to fly rather than drive, limiting my time to exactly 48 hours, enough to accomplish what I needed without prolonged contact. The rental car's GPS guided me to a modest medical rehabilitation facility on the outskirts of Scottsdale. Nothing about the nondescript building suggested the significance of what was inside. My first face-to-face encounter with my parents in over 2 years. My mother sat alone in the waiting area, her appearance shocking. The perfectly coiffed hotel manager had been replaced by someone who looked a decade older. Gray roots beneath poorly maintained dye. Clothes hanging loose on a frame that had lost considerable weight. She didn't see me immediately. I had moments to compose myself. "Helen," I said formally, using her first name deliberately. Her head snapped up. Eyes widened. "Sophia, you came." She half rose, arms extending. I didn't reciprocate. She awkwardly sat back down. "I'm here to see David," I stated, maintaining emotional distance through formality, "and to speak with both of you directly. Nothing more." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, perhaps, or recognition of boundaries she hadn't anticipated. "I understand David had a severe stroke." She nodded, eyes downcast. The right side of his body is paralyzed. His speech is affected. He's improving with therapy, but she trailed off, twisting her wedding ring. The medical bills are overwhelming. Insurance covered the initial hospitalization, but not the ongoing care. We're about to lose the condo. I didn't respond to the implied request for assistance. How long has he been here? 6 weeks. They're discharging him next week regardless of progress. We can't afford more. Her voice cracked. Sophia, I know we have no right to ask anything of you, but seeing you, just having you here, means more than you can know. I'm not here for reconciliation, I stated clearly. I'm here because I needed to say certain things directly, not through voicemails or intermediaries. I needed you to see who I've become despite what you did, not because of it. Before she could respond, a nurse wheeled my father in. The strong, intimidating consultant I'd known was unrecognizable in this slumped figure. The stroke had affected the left side of his face. His features drooped into a permanent half-grimace. His right arm lay useless. His eyes widened, seeing me. S. Sophia. The name emerged slurred but unmistakable. Tears formed immediately in his eyes. Despite my emotional armor, the sight affected me. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to acknowledge his humanity separate from his actions. Hello, David. The nurse transferred him to a regular chair and left. The three of us sat in a triangle of complicated history. No one spoke for several moments. The weight of unaddressed harm filled the space. Perhaps we should go somewhere more private, my mother suggested, uncomfortable with potential witnesses to our dysfunction. No, I replied firmly. I prefer neutral territory. What I have to say won't take long. I straightened my shoulders, centering myself in the strength I'd built over 2 years. I want to be absolutely clear about why I'm here. I didn't come out of family obligation or forgiveness. I came because I needed to complete this chapter properly before moving forward with my life. My father tried to speak, struggling with impaired speech. I continued steadily. 2 years ago, you chose to abandon me without warning. You disposed of my possessions, including irreplaceable family heirlooms. You left me homeless during a vulnerable transition. Then you blamed me for not handling the crisis you deliberately created. The facts, stated plainly and without embellishment, landed with visible impact. When I needed help most desperately, you didn't just refuse. You actively sabotaged my stability. I nearly lost my scholarship, my health, and potentially my life because of your actions. My mother's face crumpled. We never meant for things to get that bad. We thought you would just figure things out. You were always so capable. I was 22, I replied evenly, barely more than a child despite your convenient reframing, and figuring things out shouldn't have included homelessness and hospitalization. My father struggled to form words. Sorry. So sorry, Sophia. The simple apology, likely the first he'd ever offered, momentarily softened my resolve. But sentimentality wouldn't serve us. I've built a life without your support, I continued. I graduated with honors. I have a successful career in engineering. I have meaningful relationships with people who value me for who I am, not what I achieve. I have financial stability I created entirely myself. Pride straightened my mother's posture slightly. We always knew you were capable of great things. This isn't about capability. I kept my voice level despite the emotion rising. It's about basic human decency and parental responsibility. Your current circumstances don't erase your actions or their consequences. I'm not here to rescue you financially or emotionally. My father's damaged face couldn't hide his disappointment. He'd clearly expected or hoped for more. However, I continued after a measured pause. I am willing to help you navigate available assistance programs, not with my personal funds, but with information. There are medical debt forgiveness programs, housing assistance options, social services designed for situations like yours. Relief washed over my mother's face, quickly replaced by confusion when I added, this assistance comes with boundaries. I will provide information and limited guidance. I will not provide financial support. I will not pretend we are a normal family. I will not subject myself to further manipulation or guilt. That's fair, my mother acknowledged quietly. More than fair, considering everything. I've compiled information on programs you qualify for. I removed a folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. Application procedures, contact information, eligibility requirements, everything you need. I've also included the contact information for a social worker specializing in elder care and medical debt. She's expecting your call. My father reached for the folder with his functioning hand, clutching it like a lifeline. Thank you, he managed. This doesn't fix what happened, I stated clearly. It doesn't restore trust or create a typical parent-child relationship. I'm doing this because I've healed enough that helping doesn't harm me further, not because you deserve assistance. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. We destroyed something precious. I see that now. Your father sees it too. Yes, you did, I agreed simply. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired to their original state. Our relationship is one of those things. I'm not seeking revenge or punishment. I'm establishing truth as the foundation for whatever limited contact might exist moving forward. We spoke for another hour, establishing clear parameters for potential future communication. No financial entanglements, limited personal information sharing, communication primarily through email rather than emotional phone calls. No expectations of holiday visits or typical family behaviors. Acknowledgement of harm rather than convenient forgetting. As I prepared to leave, my father gestured urgently for my attention. With visible effort, he formed the clearest sentence since our reunion. "But proud of you, not for helping, for surviving us." The statement, perhaps the most honest he'd ever offered, acknowledged the fundamental truth of our relationship. Their parenting hadn't prepared me for success. It had been something to overcome rather than build upon. I nodded once, accepting the admission without softening my boundaries. I'll check in via email next week about the assistance applications. Nothing more for now. The drive back to my hotel brought unexpected peace rather than emotional turmoil. I had faced my greatest fear, confronting the people who had inflicted profound harm and emerged intact. Their power over my emotional well-being had dissipated. Not through forgiveness, but through my own growth and clarified boundaries. Back in my normal life the following week, I shared the experience with my chosen family during dinner at Michael's apartment. Their supportive questions and observations helped me process the complex emotions. "Do you regret going?" Natasha asked, passing pasta across the table. "No," I replied thoughtfully. "It confirmed what I've been working toward in therapy. They can't hurt me anymore unless I allow it. Their approval or disapproval has no power over my life." "That's the definition of true independence," Michael observed, squeezing my hand gently. Over the subsequent months, I maintained the exact boundaries established during that brief visit. My parents received the assistance they needed through the programs I'd identified. Our limited email communication remained focused and practical rather than emotional. Neither reconciliation nor complete estrangement, but a carefully managed middle ground that protected my well-being while acknowledging our shared history. The experience solidified the most profound lesson of my journey. Family is defined by behavior, not biology. The people who had demonstrated unconditional support during my darkest moments, Professor Walsh, Mr. Chen, Natasha, James, Michael, and others who had entered my life since, constituted my true family. They had earned that designation through consistent care and respect, not through genetic connection. My engineering work evolved to reflect this understanding. I focused increasingly on creating infrastructure that fostered resilience in underserved communities. The water management system expanded to include disaster preparedness programs for vulnerable populations. Each project incorporated elements designed to facilitate stability and opportunity among people without traditional family support. When painful memories occasionally surfaced, I no longer pushed them away or allowed them to overwhelm me. Instead, I acknowledged them as part of my history, without allowing them to define my present or future. The abandoned girl with rain-soaked belongings existed within my story, but she was no longer my entire identity. The foreclosed house left on the driveway that summer day had contained more than discarded belongings. It had held an unintended gift, the catalyst for building a life based on authentic connection rather than obligation, achievement, or fear. The home I had created within myself proved more secure than any physical structure my parents had provided or taken away. This is my story. A story of abandonment that became a story of rebuilding. A family that was chosen rather than given. Of discovering that the people who claim to love you don't always deserve that love back. If this resonated with you, if any part of this journey felt familiar, I want you to know something. Your family doesn't define your worth. The people who hurt you don't get to determine who you become. You have the power to build something better, to create a life with people who see you, value you, and show up for you. What was your turning point? What moment made you realize you deserved better? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe if the story meant something to you. There are more stories like this waiting to be shared. Stories of people who found strength in the most difficult circumstances. Stories of people who chose themselves. Thank you for witnessing my journey from abandonment to strength. Remember, sometimes the things we think are endings turn out to be powerful new beginnings.